All right, good morning. I believe that Councilmember Jawando is with his new son and wife today, and or at least this morning. We'll proceed. We have two ZTAs to take up, and they are both fairly straightforward. So
I believe so.
yeah.
And by the way, I'll try to note Councilmember Jawando's absence is excused absence.
Oh, for sure. It's an encouraged absence, actually. Not just an excused absence, it's an encouraged absence.
If it's not excused, you get detention, or how does that work?
Right.
I think so. I don't know. In any event, we have two zoning text amendments. The first is 1812 setback exemptions for fences. As a general matter, the zoning ordinance doesn't allow you to build anything on your property line. It doesn't want you to get confused with your neighbor, and it doesn't want you to sort of invade your neighbor's space. An exception to that is fences that are 6.5 feet high. So it limits the height of the fences as a general matter. In some instances, you can build an 8-foot fence if it's a deer fence, open grid, visible, and mainly meant for keeping out deer. In this instance, we got a request to do an 8-foot fence along a rail line. We don't have many rail lines in the county. You know, we're kind of used to the B&O and Metro, and they had lots of right-of-way, and sometimes were underground for Metro. So we never had this issue come up before. So what was put forward in the ZTA was to allow that 8-foot fence when you're abutting a rail right-of-way or a right-of-way to that right-of-way as an exemption. It was recommended approval by the planning department and planning staff. So there was really no opposition to this at the public hearing. The one thing I'll say is that there are some conditions under which you might be allowed a higher fence, although it would be very hard to get a variance to do a higher fence than what's required in the code itself. It really would require unique circumstances. So 8-foot is the easy course for somebody to take if they have something on the right of way, and then they have the option of looking for that variance.
When you say unique, do you mean like only that one property, or a collection of properties potentially might have a unique circumstance?
A lot of times unique means the shape and configuration. So you had some weird angles going on the site, or something odd in its history. It doesn't mean it has to be the only one, but it's a fairly difficult standard to get around on a variance.
Okay. Any comments from the planning board or from DPS?
I think that covers it. We think this is entirely reasonable.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I have to note Jeff Zientz's helpful history of why allow fences on property lines at all. It was an interesting discourse about the value of fences. You didn't use the joke from Robert Frost, but I was looking for it.
No, I thought I did have some.
You had Jackie Spire, who's a congresswoman?
Yep.
All right.
Privacy isn't negotiable. It's the right of every American.
There you go.
There you go. I do. I should warn your new colleague that you could find some oddball footnotes in my memos at all times. It's my incentive for you to read through everything in detail. And
it's like a trail of crumbs leading deep into his mind.
Well, Picket Fences was one of my favorite shows when I was a kid. So.
And by the way, the rules for front yard fences are very different for backyard fences. So,
okay,
you know, it's
what are the rules for backyard?
Well, it's 6.5 in your backyard, but in your front it's 4, I think, 4.5, 4. So it's very again, you don't want the county to look like a prison.
No, you
And
don't.
you don't, that's part of the reason for those rules. Okay, on to ZTA, so that's 2-0?
Yeah, 2-0.
Okay. On to ZTA 1813, which, unlike the subject matter of my memo, it concerns regional shopping center overlay zone. Sorry about that. I think I wish to say it was my first error in 13 years, but that's not true.
I looked in the footnotes, and that was indeed noticed not true.
Oh, you like this footnote better? A lot of people are afraid of heights, not me. I'm afraid of widths. Yeah, it's good for the footnote. In any event, this allows some additional height on regional shopping centers. And let me explain a little history here. I have on the screen, and if you turn on your monitors, you can see it, our online zoning ability for anybody to look up a zone. In this case, we have 2 regional shopping centers. They are both zoned, it's GR, with an overlay zone. Now, this was converted in 2014 from the C2 zone, which was general commercial, and it allowed all sorts of stuff. Even in the C2 zone, we had special provisions for when you had more than 1.2 million square feet of gross floor area to allow additional height. So we did it that way by footnote. In the new code, what we have is this overlay zone that says, in an overlay zone for regional shopping center, here are the standards. Now, part of those standards is the height of these freestanding buildings, and what we had the request for was for some additional aspects for those freestanding buildings. So it would ultimately allow, as we've done it, let me get to the right page. It would allow 90 feet for a freestanding building for retail sales and service, structured parking, or health and facility clubs. What we're getting at are at least one center, and maybe Wheaton in the future, is a more mixed-use concept that has something more than a regional mall.
So can I ask, why does the code have these stipulations about, it could be this height if it's this type of,
Well,
why not just have a uniform height allowance?
you do have a uniform height on this zone. It's 45 feet. So
Except for we tried to come up with all these exceptions to where you could go to 150, right?
you can go to 150 for a hotel, and there are other setback criteria in this if you're near the edge.
I mean, this doesn't, so if you wanted to do an office building, what would be the limit?
I didn't bring my code. I'm not sure. 45 feet is the
So
standard.
you can build a 150-foot hotel or a 150-foot apartment building, but only a 45-foot office building. I mean, it's kooky, isn't it? I mean, no one's asking for that allowance at the moment, so I'm not sure, we need to
Well, that's
worry
kinda
about it.
interesting Because there is an office building in the corner of the parking lot at Wheaton.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a different
Now
zone.
that, it may be.
Carved out of the,
It's a different problem.
Different property, but just in terms of the context, that illustrates your point. I think,
yeah,
that
exactly.
nobody would oppose an office building as part
I
of
mean,
it.
if we allow for a 150-foot building, seems like we would just want to allow for it, regardless of whether it's for a movie theater or an office building. I just don't quite understand. And it makes it very confusing, I think, for the average person to decipher what this code is. I'm
Right.
reluctant to just say, well, why don't we just allow 150 across the board? Because I don't know that that's really what we've
Yeah,
considered here. And, who knows if there's unintended consequences, but I just
Yeah.
gotta say, I don't get it.
For the record, Greg Russ from the planning board. As Jeff mentioned, this is really just a kind of a replacement for how the old code actually had it set up, because it wasn't set up in terms of just general retail uses. There were specific uses in that code, and so because of that, heights were set up just blanket for any kind of use that's especially next to residential uses. Or agricultural or rural residential uses. That's where the real impacts were. And because as part of the C2 zone where regional malls were in play, we knew that, well, they knew that there were residential properties on certain property lines, and they wanted to protect those. At the time, there were, I believe, a couple of different uses, like maybe the hotels and the movie theaters were looking to go up above the retail uses in those areas, but we knew that there were residential properties close by. We wanted to find a way to make sure that those residential properties were protected. And that's why the additional provision was placed in there to have a 3-to-1 ratio, anything above that 45-foot height along those residential property lines. For the 45 feet was just the height for that zone, period. I mean, if there's a thought that heights above that should occur, then maybe there should be some thought about whether we should even have the overlay zone at all, and put the regional malls in another zone, like a CR zone. I mean, but
right. The question is, do you want this to be a flat CR zone? Which in that case, you would have to change the underlying zoning. Here you have an overlay zone that was structured with some history to it, and we've kept that history sort of in the new code.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have a strong opinion there. I think if you went to CR, that would, that would create all kinds of implications, and so I just don't really have a view. It appears that if we need to amend it, we can, and that's what we're doing here today, so probably leave it alone. But, if there is a reason that we should, I would certainly be open to revising it. I would say I'd be more interested in, like, the mall in Gaithersburg. Sorry, I'm having
White Flint?
a senior moment. Lake Forest, thank you. But that's Gaithersburg.
That is city of
zoning.
Gaithersburg.
So, not much to add there. Andrew, any comment here? No? All right, any questions or concerns on this one? All good? All right. 2-0.
2-0? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
All right. Thanks.